Welcome to Wizard Team, a Black magical podcast for Black magical stories.
Hi everyone, it's Bayana, Robyn, and Porshèa, embarking on a journey through the many fantasy stories written by and about Black people. Today, we are covering Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood.
First,
You're already
let's just get it out the way.
I don't like y'all.
Robyn has a lot to say.
Like y'all. And I'm not doing this anymore because y'all were all like, this is a Jane Austen retelling, and it's not.
No.
It's not.
We said
an adaptation.
I specifically said it was inspired by Jane Eyre.
Jane Eyre, not Jane Austen, sorry. I did mean Jane Eyre. You did say Jane Eyre, but I was told it was a retelling.
I did not say. I said it's. People say it's a retelling.
It's not. People who are saying this should stop saying that.
Yeah.
Well, it's inspired.
It was marketed as a retelling.
It was marketed as a retelling.
Well,
and as someone who would have no idea, I was like, "Cool, I guess it's a retelling."
This is literally an arc that I have, and it says here, what is it?
Fantasy retelling of Jane Eyre. They lie.
Yeah, Ethiopian-inspired debut fantasy retelling of Jane Eyre.
They lie.
That's how they marketed as an arc.
They marketed as a lie. And okay, so this is what I'm gonna say. Like, point blank. Period. It wasn't that like I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it because of who I am and not because of the writing or the story. And because of the media. I read through audio. So just the spooky vibes were spooking me, and I couldn't, I don't know. But when I think of a retelling, I think of like there are these beats that you have to hit from the original story.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also something that I've noticed in like a lot of the like Jane Austen retelling, especially like Pride and Prejudice, or I mean, I don't see very many Persuasion, but like, you know, there's a lot of people. Apparently, there's a Jane Austen and Dragons like series on Kindle Unlimited that I'm interested in doing. I mean, you guys have me reading too much, so I don't have time. But like, I know it exists, and I'm interested in it. But my problem with retelling is like I feel like if you don't hit all of those beats, then it should just be marketed as like inspired by. And if the story is not telling the full story, it should be inspired by, right? And like, so Within These Wicked Walls has a character named Rochester and a spooky house. The why it's spooky is completely different. The Rochester is like, he's
still angsty.
He's still angsty. He's got like a lot of similarities. A little
still
bit.
Rich.
He's like, but he's much older. I mean, younger. He's much younger than this. And then Andromeda isn't super Jane Eyre-ish to me. She's got that like, oh, I'm plain and I'm not beautiful, and I have a tragic backstory. But like personality wise, I think she's like much more self-possessed than, not self-possessed, because Jane is very but like she's outwardly much more
assertive,
yeah, than Jane Eyre. And also like her humor and like, she's like annoyed by people in a way that Jane Eyre isn't. Like she walks around and she's like, these people are fucking insufferable.
Ridiculous.
And she's not wrong, but like Jane wasn't like that. Jane was much more like meek. Meek is the right word? Meek is the word that I can come up with, so that's the word we'll use. But and then it's spooky. It's spooky. There's hands.
It's absolutely spooky. I'm not saying it's not. And I also think that like listening, like the experience in which, or the medium in which you read it, definitely, or I am assuming, would have a factor in that. Like I definitely, in general, like I'm not really not like a spooky, scary, like horror girl, but I do find it easier to read than to like watch. So I would imagine that listening would be more difficult than something you're just like reading with your eyes.
It's harder to like shut the book and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my thing is I'm into Gothic stories, and so it's hard for me to catch the vibe between
Gothic
when someone is getting creeped out, and no, not horror, because Gothic I do. Although my favorite version of Gothic is horror, it's hard for me to like find a distinction between where I personally would be creeped out and versus where someone else would, because I like Gothic stories. So things that I just feel like, oh, this is just like dark. It's like dark humor and like dark setting, and like it's actually like making you feel like this is a like lived in Gothic experience rather than just like, oh, it's a Gothic house, but in name only. Because like actually everything is sunshine and rainbows. Like it's like, you know what I mean? Like the difference. So I actually, it's better for me to hear what creeps people out, so I can be like, oh, did I just write that off as being Gothic, or is it literally something that like is creepy and I just read it as Gothic because I just love Gothic and I ascribe things to it.
I'm just confused about like what Gothic is then, because to me Gothic is not just dark, it's like
it's a style.
Like Gothic horror is the literary style, but like to me, and Gothic that just means it's like based off of that Gothic time period, and like
people have fixed it to a time period, but the time period, like Victorian mansions still exist. You can still do Gothic horror set in present day, but it'd be a Gothic experience.
Yeah, but I guess like so my understanding is that like Gothic as a style is like originally just like the architectural style of like the European Middle Ages type of time, and then as like a storytelling device, it's like horror stories that take place in those big Gothic style homes and like cathedrals and shit like that. So I think that like it's much, and I know that like in use it's much broader than that, but like I can't think of a story being Gothic or being called or described as Gothic without it being scary.
It's like the atmosphere,
Gothic romance exists.
Like the
Gothic,
or the setting, I guess.
Tense and
it's light, but it's taking place in a Gothic setting. Yeah, the atmosphere is Gothic. The aesthetic is Gothic.
I don't even think the Gothic romance can be described as light. Because then to me that's like Wuthering Heights, which is not light.
That's not. There's Gothic. Because I don't go to romance too much. So when reading this book, like in comparisons, I would compare it to Mexican Gothic and Slightly Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And Mexican Gothic has like a big romance element, but is veered more on the horror side than it is romance. Isabel Cañas, she did the Hacienda, and this year released The Vampires of El Norte.
Mm-hmm.
And The Vampires of El Norte, both of those books, I feel like, so the first book, the Hacienda, was like her debut, and Vampires del Norte is her second book, right? I feel like she heard the like critique of the first book, but like it was not clear if she was trying to lean more gothic horror or gothic romance. So it kind of like you kind of feel like this tussle of like which one are you trying to lean more towards? And instead of being horror, she leaned romance in Vampires of El Norte, which is fine, but marketed as a romance and not as a horror. And it was marketed as a horror. And so all the people like I think like me who were looking for it to be horrific picked it up and was like, oh, this is a gothic romance.
See, and I think of a gothic romance still has to be creepy and suspenseful. And what I'm saying is, I totally agree.
I feel like gothic romance,
like what you say is horrific, and what I say is horrific are like on two different. I'm on
Sesame different
Street
levels.
Level. Like I don't like any.
That's what I'm saying. Explain the creep explain the creep. But for me, gothic romance is like it spends more time on the romance. Like,
yeah, but
actually,
it's not
like
light.
that's the. It is. It's oh my gosh! Like Vampires of El Norte. Sure, there's these mysterious vampires that chase them, but like you see the vampires like 3 times. Half the time they're in a like, is she thinking about me? Is he thinking about me? I'm mad at him. I'm sad at her. Like it's like more on the romance. Like you're spent more time on the emotions than you do on the actual like things they should be scared of in them. Like that was my beef with Vampires of El Norte.
So then I will concede from that definition that this is more of a gothic romance.
Slightly.
When she was like blessing the rooms and then the hands, I said, what are y'all doing to me? How utter dog dare you? And then it grabbed her ankle, and she was like, the manifestations aren't supposed to be physical. And I was like, even the best character is scary. She turns into clay or whatever.
Or pottery.
I don't, you know what? I mean, look, I think we warned you. I think we were like, but I feel like Bayana was more like got to the pedal, like pick it up, just read it.
Well, no, I was just like, I said it was creepy, but I was also like,
I did not recommend it to Robyn specifically because when I got to the chapter about bloody walls, I was like, some people cannot take this book. And one of those people is Robyn, and I would not.
Can I tell you that in Jane Eyre, the scene that correlates most to is in Jane Eyre. Mr. Rochester is sleeping, and spoiler for a 200-something-year-old book, his wife Bertha is mentally unwell. He keeps her locked in the attic, basically, of this like mansion estate. And she kind of often gets loose and roams the halls in the middle of the night. That's where like the gothic creepiness of Jane Eyre comes in, right? There's like, is it a ghost? Is it whatever? What is the thing roaming the halls when we're asleep? She sets fire to his bed, and Jane wakes up and like helps put out the fire. And then Mr. Rochester is like, oh, I must have fallen asleep with the candles on reading or something like that. And Jane's looking around like, that don't seem right, but okay. So that's what this scene that Portia's talking about like correlates to. But this man is drowning in blood, and like the blood is coming out of the walls. Like the house is like, okay, do
the
you
bodies
remember
of the house
the Beyonce when she opens the doors and hold up, and then the water gushes out, and it is beautiful and stylistic. But it's the blood of and he is people that the house has absorbed. That the house is absorbed from all of the bodies that it has absorbed. And then he is also like kind of paralyzed. So he's stuck on the bed while the room is filling with blood.
And I read that and I was like, oh, I'm gonna when I finish this book, I'm gonna talk about it in the Discord, but I'm gonna say like, no, I'm gonna be like, people who are scared,
Here's the thing is that.
Well, so the thing
in
is,
the
I
past-
remember being like afraid. Like I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna want to read it. And I remember me and you talked about it, Porshèa, and you had just finished it, and I was like, do you think I could? Because like we've discussed, I am intrigued by horror stories, but I'm also terrified of them, and so I just like I want to know, but I also don't want to have nightmares. So I was like, well, let's give me nightmares. And Porshèa was like, probably not. And I was like, okay, then I can do it.
I depends. I know. So
But it's
my
different
scare
levels.
thing
Like
is
me and
I don't
Robyn are
like
not on the
blood.
same level for sure.
Yeah. I think I have to know
I
your
definitely
scare
had
thing.
nightmares.
I have to know your scare thing, and I'm like, because I'm a wimp. I don't do pain.
That's not
I
true.
don't do it. But I don't
How
do
dare you
pain.
call yourself a wimp?
I am a wimp. I do not do pain. I really do not. We do not see eye to eye. I do not. I am not good for that.
I think. Yeah, I think.
But I
for
think
me,
that
more...
I've reached a level of like personal like safety where scary things that might have scared me before no longer scare me. It's like a weird thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's partially the medium. Like for example, like I recently reread Dread Nation, which has zombies, and I notoriously hate zombies. But reading that book, it's not as bad. Versus like when I watched that zombie episode of Marvel's What If, I was not having a good time. I was
that
straight up not
entire
having
movie,
a good time.
I was so mad when I watched
that whole episode. I was just like, no, I hate this.
Doctor Strange Mayhem of Madness, and I was like, I suffered through that. What if I should have known? Why didn't I? I didn't put two and two together.
I didn't hate. Yeah, I don't
And
remember,
I
but
was
like, I definitely was just like, I hate it here. So for me, it's medium, but also I know for me in particular, I don't really like jump scares. Stalkers, like that shit freaks me out. As somebody who like read all of the good Pretty Little Liars before she started writing to the show. And even like when I read Ace of Spades, I was like, I'm really uncomfortable right now. I actually really hate this. Versus like this kind of stuff, I think haunted houses, I think because in this case, it's a cursed house, it's not a haunted house. So it's not like there's like a ghost popping out. You know what I mean? Like there aren't jump scares in that way. And it doesn't feel like, it's not like, oh, somebody's watching you. Like that, I think that is why I was like, okay, I can do the like weird, supernatural, creepy things that are happening, but it's not like, oh, I'm being stalked through the house, you know?
Yeah, I guess. I can't do any of it. My level is...
That's fair, yeah.
Jump scares, I can't do. I can't even do, like, this is where I try to tell people, it's like, it's not even that, like, to me, I don't actually see much difference between a thriller, a suspense, and a horror. Because anything that is anxiety inducing is horrific to me. I am already, if my shoulders do this, not out of like action. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the action, but because even like, you know, if you listen to our one of our most recent episodes about Legendborn, when she's like going through that tunnel, like that whole scene made me very uncomfortable, but the whole of the book is more fantasy magic. And so there's that one scene, but you know that it's over soon, and then it's not going to go back there. Whereas like they are stuck in this house, and the house, every room is doing something a little bit differently. And she has to go cleanse all of these rooms. And then and as well, like the dude that she's falling in love with has this whole thing. And then the people are like, there's just no escaping.
I feel like once he was revealed, I think that's when it was less scary to me. Obviously this is the second time I've read it, so I already know that reveal, so it's not as scary reading it the second time. When I read it the first time, I felt like it was less scary. And I think for me, it's like, you know, because he's a hyena, so it's like hyena, not a werewolf, but like it gives more like, I think once we found that out, there was less focus on the rooms and like the house being creepy, and it was like she had cleansed most of the house by the time they got to the end too, so like it wasn't like those were obstacles, because then it was more just about like cleansing the evil eye and like, you know, making sure he was no longer turning into a hyena. And then that to me was when it felt leaning more fantasy than horror.
Yeah.
I think for me though, So, a couple different points. One, I think the things that I ascribe to like Gothic is like because a lot of Gothic tales are like set in these old buildings, and people are like suspicious of like, are they up to code or are they good? Like most if they're like, present day or whatever, there's always a feeling like you're being watched or like something's there to touch you or something like that. So like some of the creepiness, I just like ascribe to like that's like a general feeling of settling whenever you're put into a Gothic setting and that's not your norm. Like that's just a thing that comes with the device that comes with that kind of tone of telling. But I also think that the fantasy components for me were like the amulets being like the magic basically of the story, like being the like things that kept the evil eye at bay, and the evil eye being like potent and all that. Like I thought it was cool that that was like the device, and I like that it was like there's craft and skill that goes into being able to like wield even that like small amount of magic, and it's like accepted to an extent in the world and also not. But I think the thing that kept me going in the story, look, I love I love revenge. And I've always had a thing for I feel like not enough people utilize the strength of like the physical strength of books as weapons.
That was the
Like,
worst.
Homegirl in the library.
Yeah, like she was
The
wilding,
librarian.
and I was like, I've never heard of a ghost librarian who uses books as weapons, but I F with it because I've always wanted to see someone use books as weapons. Like that is just amazing to me. I love it.
I thought that was like the least scary cleansing scene. And also the most disturbing because in terms of like if I put myself into something, and I've always kind of enjoyed it. It's more like hijinksy or whatever. I was enjoying it when the librarian was being petty and like she would like open a book and it would have some like threatening
threat quote,
circled, whatever. And like I also loved it,
red
like,
and blood.
Yeah, like she like had like opened Jane Eyre and like had one of those passages. And I was like, oh, I see what you're doing there. When they started flying at her face and trying to concuss her, I was like, this isn't nice.
I was like, somebody sees the vision. No. The vision of books as murder weapons.
I was like, I go to bookstores a lot.
Right. You're like, this is not an accurate or a kind representation of librarians. But
like, new fear unlocked. Like, do I have to be afraid of libraries and Gothic mansions? Like, is that
I refuse at that point. No.
But I like the suspense that gets built up in those components. I like the suspense behind like only the magic of an amulet can protect you. In this place where the evil eye is present and has taken over the owner of this home, and even whenever that owner of the home is not in the room, you can still get got because that's how prevalent the like evil eye is here.
And I think I also liked just going into the magic system too. Like I liked that the amulet didn't work. It could only work for so long, but it wasn't like it was broken once it was done. It was more like it's gonna need some time to recharge. Like it's just not gonna work right now. And yeah, I just appreciated like that part, like that it was there. I think it was really interesting too, like who decided who wore amulets and who didn't, and how that was largely determined by really culture? Honestly like culture, but to an extent like I mean, well, like white supremacy in some ways, right? Because it's like these white folks coming in like, oh, this isn't, like Christian. Meanwhile, Ethiopia is a largely Christian country, and has been for a really long time. And so just like having that prejudice there, and then it, literally bites them in the ass.
You can hear her?
Yeah. But yeah, I liked all the aspects of that, and just like the ways. I mean, even still, like it was embedded. Like it's like even learning those skills was embedded in the church. You know what I mean? So like,
Mm-hmm.
that connection and just showing like the differences in in these cultures, but then also in the prejudice towards the Ethiopian culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I did like I was kind of confused about like the evil eye, because it seems like that is something that like runs a little bit rampant here. Like they're like being a debtora is like a job. It felt like more like aligned with like kind of being a nun or something like that. Like you're aligned to the church, but you go out, or a missionary, I guess, or something like that. Like you're aligned to the church, but you're going out and like helping to cleanse these spaces. But then like the evil eye is this like prevalent thing. But then he was
Well, I think it
cursed
was
with
more the evil
eye.
eye is the highest, like it's like the worst thing you could have.
Curse.
But there are other lesser
Okay.
like
Yeah.
curses or things.
Like the amulets, they make amulets for like even smaller scale, like
Okay. So that's, I was like a little bit confused by like, because I'm like, he was cursed by someone. So I'm like, why are we not just going after the evil people doing these curses? But I did like,
and I think it also is something that can be manifested unintentionally as well. I think there are a couple moments where Andy is like thinking about like, you know, jealousy is a way to open yourself up to the evil eye, or like, you know, like those kinds of things. Like you can be directly cursed, but you could also like bring it upon yourself if you're not careful.
Yeah, and I liked the idea of these kind of curses or like hauntings, and then the Deptera as like the answer to that, and thinking just about like how common, I guess is the right word, how common it is in like this world that she's taken us into. I think one thing I found that was like, I thought really realistic is like, so Mr. Rochester tells us basically his father was the one who had the evil eye, and then like when he died it was transferred to him, but like and they own a chocolate factory, which I think is hilarious, because Willy Wonka, they're like remaking or doing a Willy Wonka, so there's all these chocolate factory commercials, and I'm like, that you would think it would be all fun and games, but no. But like, I felt it was so realistic, the idea that like these rich Europeans then decide, oh, we're just gonna move to Africa while we deal with this curse.
Like, they were like, oh,
unleash
we're
it
cursed.
Here.
We can't let other people get hit by it. Oh, we'll just take it to the Africans.
Yeah,
they can get hit by it.
And like a fairly populous, like, I mean, they're far out, like they're kind of remote from the village, where it takes them a couple hours to get there.
It's so far that it's so weird that they shipped in people from England just to work in the house. When you said you wanted to keep people from England from being affected by your curse.
Well, those aren't real.
Yeah, but you know, they got their little class.
Racism.
Yeah. Those are servants. They don't count. Yeah, so I thought like that was, I was like, yeah, in this world in which you can be cursed, this rings very true. You would then just, and then like be snobbish to the people who have the skill and ability to like help you, like, and to treat them like lesser. But I don't know, I felt like that classism stuff was well done. I was more just like, why am I in it? My biggest thing is like, I wasn't strong enough. I won't say that I did not like the book, because it was well written. It was a story. I just will never read it again because I was so uncomfortable.
That's fair. Yeah, because we kind of touched on the world building.
Oh, I
Yeah.
did have one thing, and it's a good bridge between the world building and like the characters. It's like I don't know if we don't really talk about like where. I don't think it's ever like explicitly like said like where they are, because there's like the town or the city, and then like they're further out, unless I just don't remember.
I don't think it's named.
Yeah, but I think that like one of the things that was really interesting in this world is in terms of like the Christianity and like the Deptera, it's how cutthroat and like cruel Andromeda's upbringing is, and she's like raised in the church with like her adoptive father, who in Jane Eyre we do get these moments where she gets sent to this like school for like girls, and it is very abusive and like the type of Christianity that is like, if you're not suffering, you're not doing it, you're sinning, basically. Like you need to like feel all of the sacrifice and feel like in a way that is just not realistic, but also like is only expected of like lower class poor people. You can be just as godly and holy and untouched by sin, doing all like, you know, eating full meals, like wearing beautiful clothes and gowns, going to concerts and stuff, as long as you're doing that with a like rich level of class, then those like sacrifices don't apply to you. And so, I mean, I don't know too much about like the ins and outs of Christianity in Ethiopia, and I don't know how much of this was like just choices for world building and based on like, I don't know if it was based on like a particular branch of Christianity, because there is also, you know, like even now it's like you go to like some like Orthodox churches or like very, and you know, they're very strict, or like even, you know, the Amishness is a type of Christianity, and they're like a lot of it is based off of what you're denying yourself. I felt like that was really interesting, and it helped a lot with like the gothic kind of creepy feel of, or like kind of like hopeless maybe feel of it.
Yeah.
Like even when she is kind of realizing that she likes Magnus, she's like, oh, this is a sin, or like desire is a sin, and like the only way to like not, and then also like to feel this desire will open me up to being like encourages the evil eye, basically. Like,
I mean, like the evil eye, and also just like her survival as well.
Yeah,
because of the way she was raised, like she's taught that these feelings are a danger to her and her survival, and like being soft in this world is not something that she can afford to do. And I think
empathy is actually like punished out of her, like
exactly, literally.
Out of her.
And I guess like going into then like characters and like going into Andromeda, like I think one of her biggest kind of like character arc is really her seeing her empathy and like as a weakness versus then, or like, you know, as a hindrance to her survival, and then like towards by the end she's realizing that that's like actually a big part of why she can survive.
Yeah.
And just like reframing her perspective about that.
Yeah. And I think that it's like an interesting tack to take about also like, not only is my empathy like important to or a reason why I'm surviving, but also like there's no,
and I guess optimism too.
yeah, her optimism, but there's also like no shame in feeling this way, and like I guess switching from surviving to thriving, because like there are times when she's like, you know, I've been here, and my body's used to, like that. There's that section where she's like, my body's used to 3 meals a day. How did I get soft so fast? Type of thing, and it's like, by the end, it's like, no, it's okay. It's okay to eat chocolate and enjoy it.
Right.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike Big Wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Here on Wizard Team, it's no surprise that we love books. We also love supporting the independent bookstores.
With our bookshop affiliate link, you can not only get all the books on your TBR, but you can support indie bookstores and B&C at the same time.
And if you're not sure what you want, that ain't no problem. Check out our The Plot Thickens list full of recommendations from none other than Porshèa herself.
Head to www.bookshop.org/shop/BlackNerdsCreate to treat your shelves.
Treat your shelves!
Oh, that's nice. That's clever.
Oh my goodness.
That's clever.
I liked Andromeda. I think that like the thing I liked a lot about her too was like she was over it immediately.
Yeah.
And partially that is like we talked about with like her upbringing and like a lot of empathy and stuff being pushed out of her and like constantly thinking about survival. So she like sizes these people up and is like, you're annoying me. You're not gonna help me. I'm not gonna like go out of my way for you. And like I thought that it was great that she had to always remind herself not to go out of her way, you know, because that showed that it wasn't like a natural inclination.
Right.
But that she was like immediately like, they're annoying, she's mean.
Right,
like,
especially around like Kalela and Magnus. It was just like, and Peggy, just being like, Peggy. Y'all are
terrible.
No thanks.
Peggy was annoying.
You're awful.
Yeah,
I liked that the author took a moment to make sure to clear picture of like all this stuff that was fresh to Andromeda, like having like grown up in Ethiopia during this time period and like what is available and what she could get into. When she's introduced to pasta, like the whole experience to her sensory is just she's just like so completely taken aback by it. She feels like it's hard to eat. She doesn't understand how to manage a fork. And like she's like, why would you even use that? Like, what does that even do? And then when she's having a conversation with Magnus about it, she's talking about the fork, but he thinks she's talking about the food, but he thinks she's talking about the fork. And it's like there's like a little bit of culture clash there in that kind of discussion, because he's also mixed, but it's also like a thing where he's not like, he didn't get to grow up with his mom. So that was interesting. I really like that. Like she like it's like we get to experience with Andromeda the newness of this position that she's put in, and so you kind of get a better understanding of why she's reacting the way that she is to stuff, because a lot of it is just like fresh information. So her having emotions is something that she's had like tapped out of because of how she's grown up with Jimber. And so whenever she starts to have to like involve emotion and stuff, she's like resistant to it. And I love that that's like again related to her like overall restrictiveness, like restrictions in emotion and restrictions and like how little money she has, so therefore the restrictions in what she's able to experience and all that. And I think that also ties into this time period of like so many people who, especially like working class or class people, were put in places where they just were restricted. That was just where they were. That was their lot in life and society. And then they can actually build out more there. And I also liked that part of her journey was like she is hinted, like things that get built on are hinted at in the beginning. So there's a moment where she first has a dinner with Kalila and Magnus, and Kalila takes a moment. It's kind of like the Mean Girls like tell him that he looks hot with his sexy with his hair
with his hair pushed back. Tell him he
whatever.
looks sexy with his hair pushed back.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. And Magnus is like talking about like attraction, and Kalila's like, yeah, talking about like how she finds like Magnus attractive, and Magnus is like, oh, like, do you not find me attractive? And he's like offended. And Andromeda's like, yeah, no, I don't find you attractive, but I do find like this skill that you're doing. Like I find that this, like, as you craft this work, that's like an attractive feature of you. And I think that, and it comes back again when you see her later on in the book. When she talks up about like the one good thing that she can think about when it comes to her father figure, Jimber, is that he is really good at his work. That's the one place where she could relate to him at, was his work. And so you can see how her emotional, like she was not allowed to have emotions growing up with Jimber, but she was able to build a level of admiration and emotional tie anyways through the labor. And that's how she associates with other people first. Like her initial reaction is going to be and finding a connection to you and the skill or something related to your skill set or ability that she can draw a connection to. So I like that was like a character trait of hers that like we see get built up on, and the author really does a good job of like maintaining that as a point of her character development.
Yeah, I think another thing about Andromeda and her relationships to these people too is like with Jimber, it's like she acknowledges that like he did not treat her with love or the care that she wanted, but she also loves him and wants to care for him and is not and feels connected to him and tied to him. And then with Magnus, she's like, he is spoiled, he does all this stuff, I don't want to care for him, and yet I find myself kind of pulled to him. And like I think that it's a very interesting way of like always kind of connecting like her background and how she grew up with like how she connects with these people. Like Kalila is definitely much more of an antagonist to her, and she still she recognizes that she's being like disrespected by her, and like that a lot of it is coming from like Kalila's feelings about Magnus and all of this stuff. But then she still when like the big climax happened in the book, is still like wishing her the best and wanting her. And I think it goes into her optimism, but also like, and I think Jimber like says this at one point too, is like he keeps trying to beat out like her empathy and humanity, and it's just so like natural to her. And she's also trying to beat it out of herself and scolding herself for it. My favorite part of that is when she is trying to cleanse or like get rid of the evil eye with Magnus, and she beats up Saba is another character who like is clay pottery, and she's like apologizing while also like scattering her. It's like, because she still, Saba's treated her with kindness and all the stuff, but like Saba's also tied to the thing that she needs to cleanse. So I don't know, I think that made Andromeda really interesting to me. Even through all of the like terrifying moments, I was still like interested in her character and her thought process and how she was. I was happy to see it through her eyes, I guess.
Yeah. What about Magnus?
Magnus is such a spoiled, like
Chaos.
spoiled, yeah, like rich person stereotype. Like he just, and it's like, woe is me, angsty. Oh, that was gonna say the comparison to him. I would like to make. It's because it's like, yes, the rich part has a part of it, but sidebar, this character does not have he's not rich. But the werewolf character from I don't remember when they changed cast members of Being Human UK, when that werewolf guy is so angsty and so sad and so like he's like a good person, but he just keeps getting, life just runs rough on him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the vibe that Magnus gave me.
Yeah.
Like the werewolf from Being Human UK. If anyone else has watched that, it is
Yeah.
it is just so, yeah.
He's also
I will
like,
say
he's
that
very...
is the I was gonna say he is the most Jane Eyre like one-to-one character where I was like, yep, this is Mr. Rochester throwing temper tantrums.
Right. Yeah, I felt like I guess like a big theme, I think, in this story, and I think it's most prevalent through Magnus and Andromeda and like their relationship, is the like loneliness and not having, and like lack of affection. They both have that from different angles, and like it manifests in them both in very different ways. And like for Magnus, I think also he doesn't really have a lot of friends. Like he mentions, like when before he was cursed, like he was living in England, but none of them people wanted, like in his, class bracket or whatever, were messing with him because he's black, right? And then now he is cursed and he has to stay in this house. He only has his servants. He has like 2 friends, and one of them is his lawyer and the other is the lawyer's sister. So it's like he doesn't have like real connections that he's
social
made.
interaction.
And not a lot of social interaction. So like Andy kind of like fascinates him because she just says, and also, he's rich, so people don't tell him the truth. And so she's just saying like outright, like, you're a ridiculous human being. And he's like, wow, am I? That's crazy. This is brand new information. And he doesn't, and he's like genuinely shocked that like,
yeah, he's like, but also he's like entertained by it. He's like amused, like, oh,
he's like, tell me more about how I'm a horrible person, please.
I think it's
like,
also like
he's very like genuine. He's kind of like a puppy dog.
He's very bark is worse than bite type of thing, but definitely can bark and bite. I think that Magnus to me too is like, I like that they aged him down, because I will say, like, in Jane Eyre, one of the things I dislike about Mr. Rochester is, and he's
grown
rich,
man throwing temper tantrums,
and like, yeah, but he's like a grown man throwing temper tantrums, but he's also like making these like elaborate tricks, playing these elaborate tricks that only kind of serve him. Can't decide whether he wants to be nice, sweet, or mean, like, to the people in his care, children included. And I think that aging him down some, and also making it so that the loneliness is like
no longer killing him.
But also, like, his loneliness is like understandable, right? Like, not that Mr. Rochester's like isolation in the original Jane Eyre isn't, I mean, it's kind of understandable, but still, it's like, you did this to yourself, and you're a grown-ass man. But like, if he looks someone in the eye and they're not wearing the amulet, then they disappear. Slash, he kills them. And the only person before Andromeda gets there who is like the closest person to him and the best, his best friend basically, is a extension of this curse.
Is his dead mother. come back to fake life as a statue version of herself
of
when
her
she was
teenage
murdered
self.
by his father.
Yeah.
Stuck at the same time she was murdered by his father.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so messed up. I think another thing I wanted to note about Magnus, hopefully I didn't lose it just now. Was how much of a like he like how he was able to like get that like whole like it comes across pretty clearly that him being cut off from people's affection has like made him like want it even more and like, you know, like really be looking for it. And as you were saying, like a clear difference between how Andromeda's like loneliness manifest, where Jimber showed her to push away from like touch and feeling, and so she actively is pushing away from affection. And I always am in a weird place whenever there's a character that's more physically affectionate than the other is and initiates physical things without actually like actively asking for consent in the moment or whatever, like saying it. But I think their first kiss was her, right?
Yeah,
like
she initiated
it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really good. I liked that was like their meeting point, like or whatever. Like, but it's just hard though too because he's so affection like heavy that it's like, at what point do you know if she's like not being overwhelmed? And I think that Jimber, when she talks to Jimber, he says something to her in the way of like I feel bad, like part of me feels bad that I let you get away from here without showing you affection, so that you were so starved for it that the first person who said something affectionate to you, you're into it.
Or you're like so devoted to them.
Yeah.
And especially like Magnus is also clueless as hell as well, and so like that, and so like it's kind of a huge flaw. It's also the like crux of their you know, besides the whole evil eye were hyena of it all, like it's the crux of their like main conflict of the fact that like he's not engaged to Kalela, but there is a verbal agreement, and Kalela is clearly like romantically interested in him, and he's just kind of like la-di-da, this is fine, like I'm actually in love with Andromeda now, and I'm not gonna mention anything about it. And then when she brings it up, I'm like not understanding why it's a big deal.
And then it takes her breaking it off with me and then telling me why it was bad that I did, like I felt that way initially. It was like, what is wrong with you?
He's a spoiled child.
That's what I mean. Like he's spoiled, and he's like again, people don't tell him the truth. They literally are just like, yeah, it's fine. So like it's just it's one of those things that, again, not like an excuse for that because it wasn't cool, but again, it's like some of the things that are in some instances like, you know, have him do cool, interesting things or like sweet things. Then on the flip side, it's like, no, that was really careless.
Yeah.
I also wanted to note for Magnus that I did not like, but I don't know, I was an interesting kind of vibe for how I don't think that he actually was clueless enough to not think that he was behind people's disappearances, even whenever he woke up not fully having a memory of what he'd done the night before as a hyena. Like I feel like he knows he's responsible and that he's carrying the evil eye, and that's a thing that's getting rid of people around him. But I feel like there's too much he's like way too depressed and like thoughtful towards like feeling abandoned to not know that he actively is playing a part in these people's disappearances.
I think he does when he mentions like he's like, when I look them in the eye, then they disappear. And I think that because part of the thing is like when he, after all that, when he goes to sleep, when he wakes up, he's forgotten what happened. Like he's not like it immediately is wiped from his brain. So I think that he's very much like, at least in the beginning, And like by the end, he's definitely aware of, like, knows what's going
Yeah,
on,
that
but
he's
like,
a hyena.
yeah, and that he's like killing them. But at first, it's one of those. I'm sure it's one of those things where, like, at the beginning, he was like, "Oh, they're just disappearing. Like, that's weird. What's going on?" And then, like, as slowly, you start to
But
pick up on
it's been
patterns, and
3
you're like, "Wait."
years.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and I'm saying at the beginning of the time, and then as is going on, like,
Oh.
before Andy gets there,
Yeah.
he's like kind of starting to put 2 and 2 together, but also like, what can you do about that, right? Like, it's not like he is the
he
reason why
knows
he
that
has this
they
curse.
Yeah, and I think
And he also knows they
that he's the
disappear, but he
reason why
doesn't necessarily know they're dead.
He was, and I think when she tells him, he's like, I was just hoping that they actually disappeared. I think like that's like the part about Saba, like moving things around and stuff. It's like the whole house is weird. The whole house is like the cursed. And so he's like, more than likely I'm killing these people, but I have this, like, there's a chance that I'm not, and I'm just going to like live in that chance that they are actually just disappearing and like leaving.
But then it's also interesting because that feeds into, he has like fear of abandonment, right? So like, he's also, it's like, but even still, it's best case scenario to be like, okay, well, they left me and deal with that versus I killed them. Man.
And he also like, and I think that's one of the like things too, if we go into like Peggy, for example, that is like really in shows how like kind of immature Magnus is, but also the like arrogance of like these European like I mean, you're living in a house that is undeniably cursed. There, like, you cannot pretend like the stuff isn't happening. Your boss is wearing bells and like have these rules. You do
so
not,
you can hear him coming.
So you can hear him coming, so that you do not make eye contact, so you don't look him in the eye. But you draw the line at wearing an amulet, and like he makes these rules, but he like doesn't believe that he has any like actual control. Like when Andromeda's like, why don't you just make a rule that they have to wear the amulet? He's like, they won't do it. And it's like, you pay their salary, like, you know what I mean? Like, or they're sticking around, so they do feel something for you, because I don't care. Like, there's not enough salary in the world. And we see that with Tom and
Emma in particular. Tom is like, we can wait it out a little more, and Emma's like,
Emma's like, let's go. Like, we've done
like, I have seen quite enough. Like, this chimney is all needs all I'm
yeah, and it's like
out.
At this point, like I'd rather go be a servant in England away from this like danger than try to like stick it out and then be able to like live lavish. Like, I don't understand either. Like, I don't know. It's like, because Magnus is mostly a good person, so I don't know why Tom, but they feel some sort of like,
I think they were also trying to get enough money to be able to move back.
Apparently he pays well.
Yeah,
so
he's throwing his money around. He's like, here,
so they're trying to save up.
Yeah.
And what I got from Emma and Tom was that they were trying to like stay and like hoard the money, not only to move back, but to like set themselves up so they're not in service anymore. Like, not that they would never have to work again, but they're not going to be like in someone's home. Fine. But then wear the amulet. Like, and don't who cares what Peggy said. Like, I don't know. And so it was just like so weird to me, that level of like arrogance that was shown by like the household staff, and then Magnus, it like just like kind of reaffirmed Magnus's like bratty helplessness, because like, just make them wear them like that. I don't know.
You're
making it worse.
I like that because this is like, I think this book does a lot to be subversive of like the tropes of like Gothic horror set in this time period that was written in this time period where Africa is like the dark heart of like
Mhm.
um of danger and exoticism and all that stuff. And so I feel like this book subverts that by making the danger something that the white men brought, which is all
Mhm.
it's true. And it's being like the people who are being affected by it the most are the people who are the ones who are the most resistant to embracing the culture where they live in the continent. So it's on them. So I liked that that was a component of the story for those characters. I'm glad the homie got away. I'm glad she was like, "Nah, I see sense." And y'all, I was lingering because this man told me that we need to save up some more money. But
But
you know what? It's
if
not
he's
worth
gone,
it.
I'm
I'm
gone.
good. We're out.
I love that scene when she's like trying to convince Tom to go, like, let's go. Like the last guy has disappeared. Like, let's be out. And then Andromeda comes to ask for a ride into town, and she's like, "Oh, she out, we out." She was
Right.
tell that she
She's
was
like,
like
cool,
not
I'm gonna come
even.
with you.
And then she was like, "Oh, you just want to go to town? Well, let's go because I gotta go. Like, I cannot
Mhm.
be in this house any longer." I'm like, yes, it's
And
stressful out here.
I'm mad that Peggy tried to take Emma's like agency away from her, like ascribing Emma leaving on like Andromeda when it was like, bro, she been wanting to be out. And then whenever she came back, she was like, you took her, I know you bespelled her or whatever, and you didn't send word of where you were. And I'm like, that's another thing that I'm like, this lady has been in this house for so long, has seen many servants come and go.
Mhm.
She has seen this furniture and stuff move around on its own because nobody can see Saba besides Andy and Aunt Magnus.
Mhm.
So she just thinks she's living in a haunted house where things just float around willy nilly. Who knows if she's actually peered behind to see if it was covering anything at all. I think I wouldn't put it past her to have seen it. But I thought Peggy was an interesting character in that way, and I feel funny about SJ, who is clearly a black man, ascribing like Peggy's cooking to like it was Saba's cooking, but he was describing it to Peggy, and I was like, why would you think that this white
Peggy made
lady
that.
from England knew how to make a whole Ethiopian spread?
Come
Like,
on,
sir, what are you
be
talking about?
serious.
Be serious.
I think it also. I don't know that necessarily Saba wasn't visible. It felt like for lack of a better, Doctor Who, we're just gonna say it, like a perception filter type thing, where like if you
Yeah,
saw her, if you like let yourself see her, then you saw her, um, versus like, but also just
you.
like walking by. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess it's a perception filter type of thing because I'm thinking like they saw her as like human, but didn't see her as like supernatural or pottery or whatever. But then like Andromeda didn't see her as that until she
Yeah.
was like a naturally strong, and yeah, so she didn't even know. So
I think she
yeah,
ripped her arm off or something and then
she,
got cut.
yeah, she was like, I'm holding. Why am I still holding your arm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That part
I
was
mean,
also
speaking
scary.
of Saba, just in general, like I really liked her.
She was my favorite character.
Yeah, she was so sweet, and like also like literally like you can once like the reveal of her like being Magnus's mom,
Mother.
it just kind of like it's a whole new like perspective on the situation, I guess is the best way to
Yeah,
say it.
I thought like more the reveal of her relationship with Jimber was really like put a good perspective on it too, because like I felt like she her story is very sad, right? And like she's killed by her husband, but you don't really get the sense of like scale of that or like when she
Well, it sounds like he was cursed. I don't know that Saba was actually his wife though, because I think it says at the beginning that he was cursed by his wife. But Saba was the first kill like of the curse.
Oh.
And then becomes like the guardian of house and like the or the servant, I guess, of the evil eye.
Oh, okay, I didn't get that. But Magnus is her son, and that's just like the weird servant owner dynamic, maybe.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I was gleaning.
Okay.
I don't know that it's like 100% clear, but
I got the sense that, like, from Jimber at least, like, she left to go be with this rich man, and then kind of like
could have been that too.
in Jimber's eyes, kind of like reap what she sowed type of thing. Whereas, you know, you don't know why people do anything, but the way in which they talk about this town, like survival, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
she was like made a choice to survive, and then it ends up being, you know, like the choice that kills her, but she still is not only tied to this house, and she looks young, right? She's like her younger self, but she feels, I don't know if motherly to Magnus is the right word. She's tied to Magnus because she's tied to the curse, but like, you know, she takes time out to like, she cares for him, and like, you know,
he often calls her his friend. Like he knows that's his mom, but I think their relationship is different. I think in part because she's so young, or seems so young.
Yeah, and she's like, you know, like taking time to have like snowball fights, and she just tries to, I think, make his life better in the ways in which she can control, knowing that she can't control everything. And so even with like Andromeda like wanting to leave, and she's like trying in her own way to be like, you can't leave him, and then when you know, watching over her because she knows that Magnus is like cares for Andromeda and stuff. And so I think that like she was like just a really good character, but I also felt conflicted because, you know, like as soon as, and they say kind of as soon as we find out that reveal, like as soon as Andromeda saves him from the curse or cures his curse, then she's gonna go away.
I liked that. I mean, I think that given that both of the goodness, I guess it's just the I keep thinking about how many stories that I get drawn to that I have orphans as the protagonist or lead characters. But given that both Magnus and Andromeda are like orphans to the greater extent, I think that this gives it even more like twisted, tragic fate of that to Magnus. So like his eccentricities are like they make sense because it's like, bro, he has grown up with someone who looks like a teenage girl that he knows is his mother, and has recently been settled with a curse where he like sees her all the time, but no one else can see her. And it's like, it's just like so many things that are pulling on him that I think that like for Saba, like character is just like the fact that she's able to help him like maintain a level of sanity, and she's doing her best to do that. And he's like going through all that. It was like really cool. I like that how kind, like unerringly kind, like even as she's forced to do the bidding of the curse, is like you know, responding reluctantly to Andromeda when she's trying to be like, you don't have to do it, and she's like, I gotta do it, bro. I wish I could, not. And I love that that was like a whole thing. I love that they had a moment of like, there's something very heartwarming about another Black person caring for another Black person's hair without having been asked to do it or commissioned to do it, literally just doing it. Like that is a labor of love to take care of someone else's hair without being paid or expected to do so. Like that is just like, so when that part came in, I was like, oh,
it was so sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also, this is more of a question because, as y'all know, I did not read Jane Eyre, and I shan't. And I read a different, not really retelling, but inspiration, and I shan't read that ever again either. But I was wondering, or it kind of felt to me like Saba was, is her name Bertha, the one who was in the
The
attic?
wife.
Like, part of me wonders if that was what it was. It was like Magnus's dad was Rochester, and Saba was the one who was kind of like held captive,
Mm-hmm.
and like hidden in the house in that way. Um, yeah, that's kind of what it felt like. But I was curious what y'all thought about
Mm-hmm.
that.
I haven't read Jane Eyre in such a long time. Like it's been a long time. Uh but it's like that's the allegory seems like similar to me.
I'm not sure because I feel like with Bertha, and I think this is a flaw of uh Bronte's writing. Like Bertha is such a like a kind of a one-dimensional character. She's just like this crazy foreign woman. And Saba definitely has more depth and more like humanity, and you get to see more of who she is outside of one person's perspective or like one moment or moment in time kind of. And so I think that in that way they're a little bit different. I do think the kind of like invisible, pushed aside silent victim kind of is a
Mm-hmm.
good parallel. But yeah, I think there's a little bit more depth to Saba than you ever get with Bertha. Unless I guess you read the White Sargasso Sea, whatever. Diana's favorite book.
Hate that book.
Which book?
Wide Sargasso Sea. It's
It's
trash.
like
I've not heard of it.
it's like a Jane Eyre
It's supposed to
prequel.
be
Or...
it's supposed to be like a, meditation on Bertha and like trying to humanize her, but then in doing it, it's mad racist to everyone else involved. So it's yeah. I had to read it in college, and I was like, I hate it here.
What was the need for the racism?
I
She's
don't
a
know.
white woman.
White people be racist sometimes.
I know, but like,
it wasn't like a contemporary. I can't remember when it was written. I can look it up. It wasn't like it's not
contemporary.
Yeah.
It definitely didn't
It's
help
from
her be
the
like,
60s.
I want to read Jane Eyre.
Yeah, 1966.
She was like, Robyn, I had to read this book for class, and I will never read that funky book you be talking about.
I was like, I don't need no parts.
Wasn't interested before, but will never pick it up. If this is the correction.
Oh my god! Literally, that's why I was like, this is supposed to be the y'all trying to fix something. This is the fix. No, thank you.
I picked up Bloody Chamber by what's her face? Oh, Angela Carter. And I know she's a white lady, British, and writing in the 60s, but there were some things in there I'm like, so she was writing like historical like fairy tale retellings that were set like in like earlier time periods than where she actually lived. And so it's like cool, like sure, fine. And then like but then she like used like expressions that may have been around in those time periods but were not necessary to use in 1966 when she was writing it. And I was just like,
It's like,
what was the reason?
What if we didn't? So let's talk about Jimber.
Jimber was such a weird character because it was like, I hate you, man. And then you get a little bit of context and you're like, I still hate you, man. Like,
Magnus was wrong though. Like, I'm like, Magnus, this is not your place.
Yeah,
like,
Magnus was wild. But like, to me, that like that more about Magnus is like immaturity and like temper tantrums and like entitlement than it did about Jimber. But like, I did like the when we actually get to like hear from Jimber, and it's like he should have never taken her in. He did not have the range. But like that idea of I tried my best to do this thing. So,
and it's an interesting thing because like he was absolutely abusive to her.
Mm-hmm.
He also did save her from, you know, being
life as a sex worker,
right, at the age of 5,
minor,
right?
Yeah.
And so you know, there is the like nuance there. There is also the part of like him not being able to physically touch people because of his run-in with the evil eye. And so, and then also, you know, his pain and stuff about being like, because he and Saba had a relationship, and Saba left him and then died. Don't know exactly how much time happened between them, but then she died and also became a servant of a different evil eye. So like, it's not like, again, it's like context, not necessarily excuses.
right.
But I think that it also helps Andy in the sense of like, and this kind of brings it back to like the prevalence of like Christianity in this book is also like her own. It feels like his character is more for her to like forgive him versus like to redeem him.
Yeah. And that also to give her a sense of like, this is what happens when you prescribe to that like sacrifice, like this is who you become kind of thing as well. So he was definitely like a more of a plot device, I guess, but like also, bruh, take her from the brothel and then drop her off. I don't know.
But he said
I think he mentions that he tried
to
to
different orphanages, and she would run back home.
Yeah.
She'd run back home to him,
and then she happened to be like good at amulets or not amulets.
Yeah,
amulets.
But
But it was funny. I think I liked that. So I like all stories that have no spare parts. Like he could have easily been a drop-off character that she just mentioned and like never really had to interact with within the actual timeline of the story, and that would have been fine. And I love that. But I always love whenever it doesn't care. I don't care what medium it is or whatever. It could be a TV show, it could be a podcast, it could be whatever. If you drop off like I guess it's Chekhov's gun. If you have a gun, like it should like go off at some point in the story. And not every character is a Chekhov's gun. Not every aspect of a person's story is like, you know, that thing. But whenever things wrap up completely, then it does kind of feel like a wholeness to the story that you don't really get with every story. And I like that for Jimber's character. Like his redemption is not really a full redemption. It's just like her being able to give him the flowers that she can give him before his time, before he's gone. And I appreciate that she's able to like make that kind of closure.
Yeah. And it's really for herself and not for him at all.
For herself.
Which is
and
like,
not for
yeah.
But I think he's, to an extent, he is resistant to needing any like affirmation because he's kind of willed himself to think that he doesn't need it because he's been able to live life long enough without it. So he therefore does not need it. And I think that it was cool that he was saying that like she was the reason that he had to continue to live. And they mentioned that the other 3 Doteras who were able to get rid of hyenas ended up killing themselves, and he was the 4th. And he, whenever she brings that up, he says like, I had a reason. You were my reason to not give up. So I think that was like a recognition that they both needed. They both needed to come to terms of like they needed each other, and they know that each other needed each other.
Yeah, for sure. I think we already talked about these other folks. So any final thoughts on the book that we haven't covered yet?
Just that I do think, I don't want people to think that I didn't find the book interesting. But like,
She was just scared.
Don't let your friends talk you into something. Peer pressure is real. Stand up for yourself. Don't just do things for content's sake. And read more books so that you can have a counter. If someone says, hey, let's read this thing called Within These Wicked Walls, you can say, how about instead?
It's not like you're having a whole season on something you didn't like. Cursed child.
This is
So
This is true.
We did
do that.
Okay, tight. Then MVPs.
I made Andromeda my MVP because I liked her character journey. I think that the main theme that I pulled from this story was that like it was about a group of people who are conflicted about how to show love after they've gone through circumstances that have shown them that life and love can be liabilities. And I think that she was a perfect personification of like going through that character journey, that like love is actually worth the extra fight behind it to keep it. And I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed that like it even in the spooky and or confusion sections, like where she was confused, she never lost her like, I'm going to figure it out, I'm going to retreat, but I'm going to figure it out, and then I'm going to come back, I'm attack it, and I'm gonna do it. And I appreciated that in a main character.
I gave my MVP to Saba. I think that like her being just a very good caretaker, and like all of the moments of like levity and sweetness that I needed, they came at like the right time. I don't even know if they came at the right time, but they were just like really helpful to help me get through the book. She was an integral part, and she was also an integral part in some of the scary moments as well. But like, even then, she was just a very sweet character, and I just wanted the best for her. And even though it was like a tragic story or tragic, story, she made the best of it.
She made lemonade out of lemons.
Yes, she did.
I too want to MVP Saba for like some of the same reasons. I like that. Yeah, like Andy was able to have a friend there, even separate from like Magnus, and just like show like just how she was looking out for everyone, even while also having to like succumb to the evil eye, right? Like she was trying her hardest to be helpful in expelling it, and she also just was like kind and also like sly, and it never felt like she had given up hope either. Like she was very much like an encouragement to everyone, so like that as well. How about benched?
I had to bench Magnus's daddy because like don't do things that end up not only giving you the evil eye, but then your son.
And then he had himself murdered so it would get passed off of him onto his son. Like
he purposefully passed it on. He was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
He's like, hot potato, not me, not it.
Literally trash.
Take accountability, man.
I benched Andromeda's parents because they're about to take a 5-year-old to, and I just can't. So they get a perma bench for that. That's trash.
Yeah, that's very real.
And they didn't care enough to figure out where she went afterwards either, because where'd they be?
Right, because she got kidnapped by Jimber out of the brothel, and they weren't concerned about that. They're like, well, she's out of our problem.
Terrible.
Some people don't deserve children.
This is true. This is very true.
And with that, thank you for listening. Join us next week when we finish our reading of Legendborn with chapters 57 and 58.
Wizard Team is a part of the Black Nerds Create Collective. If you want to keep up with our content, you can. Check out our website at blacknerdscreate.com. Follow us on Instagram and Tumblr at Wizard Team Pod and at Black Nerds Create. Also follow our TikTok at Black Nerds Create.
Ooh,
Woo!
not a TikTok.
TikTok. Stop
Bye,
headbutting
y'all.
me. I'm sick of you dogs.